Hello, everyone. I'm Kavita Ilangovan, and I'm from the National Library Board of Singapore, and I'm the Senior Manager of the Punggol Regional Library. And before I share a lot more about what the Punggol Regional Library has been doing, I would like to share a little bit about what the National Library Board has been doing in the last few years. So the Punggol Regional Library is our very first inclusive library that we have for mainly persons with disability. And for the National Library Board, in the last few years, we have started what we call LAB25, which is the Libraries and Archives Blueprint 2025, which is essentially an invitation for our partners and our community to collaborate with National Library Board in this journey to innovate and experiment, especially in this changing world where things have been changing quite a bit, right? So what we are trying to do is to work with our partners so that we'll be able to reach out to our users so that they can adapt and learn from the libraries. So we're trying to reimagine how the Singapore libraries and archives are, but we need to collaborate with our partners. And there are 4 key areas that we have identified that we are trying to focus on. So the very first one would be the learning marketplace. So the library does have a lot of resources for our users, but with the help of partners, we are able to have a more extensive database and platforms for our library users to tap on. And the second one would be for informed citizenry. So for this, if you've noticed that most of us, almost all of us, have receiving information from everywhere. But what we are trying to do is to get our users to be able to discern on their own what would be considered a real news and what would be a fake news. So other than providing platforms for them to learn from, we also want to help them to give them the tool to be able to discern on their own when they're receiving information. The third would be Singapore Storytellers. So we do have a huge collection of memories on Singapore. And what we want to do is to inspire and encourage our users to have a love for Singapore stories. And the last one would be our Equalizer, which is my main focus for today. It is to ensure that every user is not left behind. We are able to reach out to every user that to help them to learn. So what we've been doing under the Equalizer role would be to reach out to low-income families to ensure that they also have a platform to learn. The next would be Experience It. It is to encourage people to learn about emerging technologies. So we do have a lot of emerging technologies, but a lot of times we do not have the opportunity to try it out. So as the library, not only do we provide books like what we traditionally do, what we've also been trying to do is to ensure that our users do get the experience or the opportunity to experience emerging technologies. And the third one, which I'll be sharing a lot more on, would be accessibility services that we have introduced. So like I was saying, I am managing the Punggol Regional Library, which is our very first inclusive library, and we have introduced quite a number of accessibility services in this library. But before we started this, there was a journey that we started before this. So in order to get to this point, before we even started the library, what we had to do is we had a lot of focus group sessions with various groups and persons with disabilities and the caregivers so that we understand exactly what are the issues that they face, the challenges that they may be facing, and what would they like to see once we start a library with inclusive services. So for example, we started doing programs, and when we did the programs, then we didn't have much knowledge on how to do it. So we studied what was available, we conducted it, and we even got professionals to come in. So at that time, we got our occupational therapists to come in to help us to see how we're conducting the programs, how we can improve it, and to give us suggestions. And we did a prototype for a calm space. So a lot of times, people with autism, sometimes when they have a meltdown, they would like to go to a little space where they can regulate and to calm down. So before we started having a calm space within the Punggol Regional Library, we chose another library. We did a little prototype to see how we could create a space for them and what could be incorporated in these spaces so that they would feel comfortable. And we looked at our content and resources. We looked at our physical collection. We looked at our digital content. And we worked with persons with disabilities to understand whether they're able to access them. And if they're able to access them, what is it that they would like to see? We had several feedback sessions. So we do have a reservation locker where anybody can reserve items from the library and pick it up from. But just having the reservation locker would not be sufficient. We also need to ensure that persons with disability have the ability to retrieve the items from these lockers. So what we did was we had focus group sessions to get them to come in to try out and to see how we can ensure that it's accessible for them to retrieve the items that they borrowed. And with borrowing station, we have borrowing stations in all our libraries, but sometimes it is not easily accessible for, depending on what is their special needs. So what we tried to do is to get them to try, and depending on their disability, we tried to have various type of borrowing stations for them. So essentially, we reached out to many persons with disabilities, as well as their caregivers and the social services agencies, to see how we can address the issues they may face. So what I'm going to share now would be how the experience they would have when they are coming into Punggol Regional Library. So there are 4 areas that we are focusing on. So before a person even comes to the library, we look at the access to the library and within the library to help them navigate their way to the library. The next that I'll be sharing would be, once they get to the library, to make sure that our staff are able to communicate effectively to the persons with disabilities. So it's not just enough for them to get to the library, we need to ensure that our staff are also properly trained to help them, and then to give them access to print materials and the digital content. And finally, to also ensure that not only are they coming to the library, but they also be able to fully participate in all our activities as much as possible, so that they are integrated with our community. So access to and within the library, which is the very first thing. So even before they come to the library, what we try to do is we do have a dedicated website where we inform them of things like what are the wheelchair-friendly routes that we have for all our libraries. We have social stories, which help them to understand what they can expect when they visit a particular library. We have visual schedules. So when we do have programs that are meant for persons with disabilities, we also include our visual schedules so that they know what they can expect during a program. And like I mentioned, we do have a one-stop accessibility information website, webpage, where they can get all this information. Other than helping them understand what they expect before they come to the library, and once they come to the library, what we offer at the Punggol Regional Library. So currently, this is the dedicated space that we have is currently at Punggol Regional Library. We do have a calm space. So like what we prototyped earlier, we do have this place called a calm pod. So in this area, in the calm pod itself, there are 2 areas in it. One would be a padded area. So if the person with disability needs to calm down in a more safe environment, we have a padded area where they can use. And then we also have a caregivers area just beside it. So the caregiver can look on and to ensure that the person with disability is all right. And we also have other services that we have, amenities that we have, like the adult changing stations. And we also ensure that the shelves within this particular library are of lower shelves as compared to some of the other libraries. This is to ensure that persons on wheelchairs can also have easily access the books that are on the shelf. Next, I'll be sharing with you about our staff. Like I shared earlier, not only is it important to help persons with disabilities come to the library, we have to ensure that our staff are also able to effectively communicate with them. So what we have done formal training, and we've also done immersive experiences. So for example, in the picture on the right, you would see we had a collaboration with one of our partners, which has guide dogs. So what we wanted to do is for our staff to be able to put themselves in the shoes of a visually impaired user and how they would navigate themselves through the library, so they would understand that how they can help the person with visual impairment and some of the challenges they may face once they come to the library, so that when they are helping the person with visual impairment, how best would they be able to help them out. Yeah. And not only do we do that, we've also included learning sign language. Not everybody, but what we've tried to do is to at least have basic understanding of sign language so that we can communicate basic information to anyone who is deaf. For our digital and print content, for the Punggol Regional Library, we do have 3,000 English books that we consider as accessible collection, and we have split that into 4 categories. We have Braille with text, we have social stories, we have phonic readers, and touch and feel books. We also have books for persons with disabilities, the caregivers, and their professionals. So these are all housed under the accessible collection in the Punggol Regional Library. And we also understand that a lot of times persons with disability may have trouble coming down to the library. So the digital content is also very, very important for them. So even if they're not able to come down to a physical library, they should always have access to our content. And so we have been looking at improving the accessibility of our mobile app and our NLB website, so they have all the resources in hand and they have no issues, or at least very little issues accessing them. We try to improve it as much as possible as time goes by. And the last one that we have would be, like I was saying, not only do we want them to come to the library, we want them to be able to fully participate in the library. So we've been really looking at all the services that we have in the library. So for example, the borrowing stations, unlike the other libraries where we only have one type of it, for the Punggol Regional Library, we have several types. So like the one on the very left picture, we have what it's called a borrow and go. So what the user can do is to wheel, if they're on a wheelchair, they can wheel themselves in, and then it will detect the number of books they have and what other items are there, and the items can be borrowed under the user's account. And then they can wheel out of the borrowing station, so that if they have difficulties lifting up the books, this would help them. We have another borrowing station where, again, for if it's a wheelchair user, they may have difficulties wheeling in because of the leg space. So we try to ensure that there's enough leg room for them to wheel in and then borrow the items. Reservation lockers, like I mentioned earlier, is where they can retrieve books that they have reserved. What we've tried to do is to ensure that if they need an option to access books on the lower tiers in the reservation locker, when they are borrowing the item, they are able to indicate to us that they are looking for a friendly height option. So say if it's a person on a wheelchair and they come there to borrow, they may not be able to access the items on the higher reservation locker tiers. So they will still be able to reserve the items that are highlighted in yellow image in the middle. And we've done several focus group sessions with persons with visual impairment. So also see whether if it's possible for them to locate the particular reservation locker to pick up an item. So before we even started something like that, we did many focus group sessions with all these persons with disability. We've also catered assistive devices in the Punggol Regional Library. So we have various assistive devices like the keyboards. We looked at the trackballs, we looked at the joysticks, and even for the keyboards, we have several types. We have the large print ones, and the large key ones, and we also have the contrast in colors. So depending on the special need and what they require, we have it, and they can access it within the Punggol Regional Library. The next would be programs. So in the library, we have a lot of programs, and what we have tried to do is to cater as much as possible so that persons with disabilities will also be able to join in for the programs and interact with everyone else in an inclusive environment. So we use assistive technology like live captioning and the hearing loop, and we also provide them with additional materials to aid them with their learning needs. So if it's needed, we'll send them the materials in advance, and we also will have the live captioning during the program itself. And we started this off at the Punggol Regional Library, and we're looking at how we can also spread this to the other public libraries that we have in the network. So when we started out services for the persons with disabilities, what we also found out from them is there's certain things that they need a little bit more. So for example, when someone borrows a library item, they may need slightly longer period to read the item, or they may need a little bit more time to come back to the library to return it. So we understood that they needed a longer loan period or the longer renewal period. So what we did, we have an accessible membership that we introduced, which included certain benefits that would help them because they need a little bit more. For example, loan period or the longer loan renewal period. We also allow them to have a free reservation. So a lot of times they may find it a bit daunting to come to the library. They're able to come to the library, but they may not want to access the library as it is. So reservation locker is a wonderful service that they have where they can borrow the item through the reservation locker itself. So we do provide free reservations for our accessible members, and they do have priority access to the calm pods that we have at the Punggol Regional Library. So these are some of the benefits that the accessible members do have. And I've said quite a bit about the Punggol Regional Library, so just put everything together on all the accessibility services that we have for the persons with disability. Like I was saying, we We looked at it in 4 different areas to ensure that the access to and within the library is there. So like I was saying, we do have the social stories so that they are able to understand what to expect before they even come to the library. And once they come to the library, if they do require a calm area, we do have the calm pods for them. And we definitely have to ensure that the staff are able to communicate with them effectively. So we do have a communication board where we have the visual aids for them if it's required to communicate with the user. We have assistive devices for them to communicate if necessary. And access to the print materials and digital content is very, very important. So we have the accessible collection. And we also look at the services provided on an NLB mobile app. And for them to fully participate in our activities, to borrow on their own and everything, we have the borrow and go, and we also have the accessible programs for them to participate in, and the accessible membership that they can choose to sign up for if they're interested. We've also introduced the accessible icon at the Punggol Regional Library. So it's the little purple heart that we have. So this is mainly to indicate to everybody that the Punggol Regional Library welcomes persons with disabilities, because we have a lot more accessibility services that we provide for them. And we have marked out these spaces for them with this icon so that people understand that certain spaces and certain collection are meant, although it's meant for everyone, we would like them to know that it's prioritized for persons with disabilities. Okay, so we do continuously engage them, even though we have started out the services. So we do have quite a number of tours. So we invite schools to come in to use our space. We introduce to them the services that we have. And during programs, so either when the schools come in, they will give us the feedback if there's any, or when we do programs, we also collect the feedback from them so that we know exactly what are the programs that they want, what more they want to see, or what exactly we can change if there is a need to. For accessible collection, we just started out. So we will be looking at how we can see what are the collection that they prefer and what more they want. Yes, so the feedback channel is there. They can always email us if there's a need to. This is more of a visual comparison. We don't have the exact numbers of the number of PwDs visiting the Punggol Regional Library, but just for visually, we do see a lot more. But mainly because we do have the programs and the tours also. So, but we do see persons with disability coming into the library to visit us, but we don't have the exact number at this point in time. But we are looking at collecting data of such so that we know exactly what they are using. Because when we look at the persons with disability, there are so many types, right? So we look at the partners for each individual one. So for example, when we looked at the visual impairment, for example, we look at partners on how we could train. So depending on what we want, so sometimes they do provide us with programs, or they help us in terms of feedback. Sometimes when we want to prototype something, we do partner them so that they can bring in the client so they can help us when we're doing a prototype to give us the feedback. We were very, very dependent on all these different partners to help us to bring in the clients. So if we are working on, say, for the CAMPOT, for example, we needed to work with the organizations to bring us a group of clients to help us to see whether the CAMPOT was, we had what the provisions needed for them. When we had the borrowing stations and we are trying out all the different type of borrowing stations, we also needed a group of clients to help us with it. So this is how we partnered with all the different agencies and the organizations to help us bring in the clients to try out, to prototype, and to give us the feedback. So now that we have rolled out the services, we still do work with the organizations and partners, again, to bring in the clients so that they can try out the services that we have rolled out for them. Yeah. So sometimes they do need a bit of help getting their way here, and this is when the organizations do come in to help us with that. We have always welcomed persons with disabilities in our library, but the actual fact is sometimes the libraries were not accessible. Although we welcomed them, the spaces were not prepared for that. So in terms of the Punggol Regional Library, since our aim was for that, we made sure that space was accessible for them. So that was the very first thing that we could do for them, to ensure that the space is accessible so that they could make their way to the library itself. So in terms of change, now that we do have a space to welcome them, truly welcome them, because the space is accessible, we can try out all the services, and we can also see whether if we do want to explore other libraries, what is it and how is it we can do it for the other libraries. So I've come to the end of my presentation, and I hope you found it informative. If you need to know more about what are the services that we have, like I said earlier, we do have the accessibility information webpage, which is the very first QR code. And if you want to know more about the Punggol Regional Library, you can look at the second one. And if you need to contact me, if you want to know a lot more about what we have, you can email me at the email address stated on the third image. Thank you so much, and have a good day.